But it really comes down tonight about everybody here that's actually interested about the direction of the country. And Amanda emailed me a few weeks ago asking me for some time tonight to come and speak to you all about New Zealand First, what we stand for, and the principles and the ethos and the people behind it. And she actually gave me a very, very detailed email. In fact, I could have just about brought that and read that tonight. Look, I will give you a little bit of my background, why I joined New Zealand First, where I came from, my background, and a little bit of that history, because I think it paints a very important picture. Insofar as I grew up politically motivated as a young man. My mother was on Labour. She actually, after my father and her husband, my dad, they split up. She was dating a Labour MP called Richard Mason, so we were very much, she was an evangelist, very loud, well-spoken Labour supporter, and on my father's side he was a National supporter. But I spent a lot of time with my father, and I have to say in the 90s it was quite a common occurrence for me to have the likes of Bill English, Anne Tolley, even we had Jenny Shipley come over and spend time having cups of tea at home. So I grew up very much with the understanding that the National Party was there for provincial New Zealanders. It was designed and set up in 1936 to ensure that the rural provincial New Zealanders got the best bang for their buck, and we could actually send our exports off, creating jobs, wealth, economy, growth, and so I thought this is fantastic. And all the principles that the National Party stood for, I grew up believing absolutely wholeheartedly. And I got a little bit disillusioned in 97, 98, when Jenny Shipley rolled Jim Bolger, and I was talking to my father about state asset sell-offs and talking about some of the cracks that were starting to appear in the National Party from what it was to where it was heading. It was a bad trajectory. So I basically gave him the thumbs down, sorry Dad, I'm out of here, and I left my support base from the National Party and moved up to Tauranga in goodness me, I actually was up there a little bit earlier than that, in 1995. Anyway, I was sort of a little bit stateless for a year or two until I met Winston Peters. My background is in hospitality, restaurants and bars. I've got business coaching and mentoring business and events-based business, so it was only a matter of time that I bumped into Winston in one of my establishments and sat down with him, expecting a fairly sort of a robust discussion about his party's principles and where he saw the future of New Zealand. And of course he's a racist and he's xenophobic and all these things that I believe to be true, because back then I didn't have the time but just to read the headlines and a couple of paragraphs into a newspaper. And I was actually astonished that this man that everybody was throwing rocks at every opportunity they could, the media were talking about, I thought, there's some real things here. This is a real policy. This is everything that I believe in. I believe in state assets. Selling them off after generations and building them up so that multinational companies can get their grips into them, get their profits out of them. It's just absolutely against what I stand for. I'm absolutely against the separatist agenda that successive governments and existing governments have had, creating a divide between iwis and Kiwis and saying that somehow we're different and we should be treated differently. I've had real umbrage with that. So when I spoke to Winston, I actually had an epiphany, and so I became a very solid supporter of New Zealand First and hosted Winston many, many times to come and speak to people within my establishment. And I guess the real telling part was in 2002 when we saw Labour have their biggest defeat of 23% under the leadership of Bill English, that even though my father was the chairperson of the National Party for Napier, he voted for Winston and has voted for New Zealand First ever since also. So that was a real eye-opener. And for me, moving forward and being asked the question what it is that separates New Zealand First from all the others, the red and blue, nothing new, the Coke versus Pepsi sort of banter that we've been calling the two parties, Labour and National, because it absolutely rings true. There is very little between them. And if you go back to when Labour was set up in 1908 in the west coast of the South Island at Blackwall, all right, again, this is my mother's heritage. The Robinsons owned the hotel, which my mother is a Robinson. So that's the ancestry down the Labour Party side with my mother. So that party was established, and it was established for the workers and their families to make sure that work conditions were right, that a fair day's pay, when you get a fair day's work, meant you get a fair day's pay, and that people, if you needed support from the government, they would be there to help you out. That was the Labour Party. They were there, the party of the people and for their families. And we have already spoken about the National Party in 1936 that came along, similar in respect of putting families and people first, but it was about provincial New Zealand. It was growing exports, etc. But the left and the right that we have understood to be the political landscape for a millennia almost has changed completely. We do have two factions now, but they're not left and right. We've got globalists, who are all these political parties and movements and governments around the world who are hell-bent on creating wealth through neoliberalism, through this trickle-down economy, thinking that if the wealthy are getting really rich at the top, that wealth is going to trickle down to everybody at the bottom. And that just is not working. It's an experiment that has failed. It's been failing for 32 years that we've established it in here. And it was actually interesting, I get off base a little bit, a few weeks ago when Jim Bolger actually came out in the media and said that very thing.
Yeah.
He made a huge mistake bringing neoliberalism into this country, this free market ideology that's trickled down with the wealth at the top and it reached the bottom. It doesn't work. It's like molasses in a refrigerator. It stops after the first tier of executive staff members and so forth. So you've got the globalists who sit on one side, who would like to see open borders so that they can peddle their wares and their trinkets and make as much profit without paying their fair share of tax. And that's exactly what we're seeing under this government, and dare I say it, under Labour also. The reality is we have got multinational companies operating in New Zealand that pay next to no tax. And this is true, you can write this down. They're the top 20 multinational companies currently operating in New Zealand, turnover collectively $10 billion a year. Now, if you took a 20% return on investment for those businesses, which is not unrealistic, in fact, many of them are getting more than that, they should be paying around about $600 to $680 million in tax. That's just for 20 multinational companies. I want some feedback from the floor. Right, I'll give you a bag of smiley faces. Here they are, they're invisible, but I'll give you a bag of smiley faces. The person who can get the closest to how much those top 20 multinational companies paid collectively. Now, you can give it to me as a percentage or you can give it to me as a dollar value, but what have we got?
5 million.
5 million. Good starting spot. What else have we got? Who else?
I'm going to say 1%.
1%.
That's it.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%. You're all really close, but you're a million miles away.
No.
Those top 20 multinational companies, I'm going to repeat this because I want you to walk away thinking about it. Because this is happening right under our very nose. And this is the bedrock for fixing a lot of this country's problems moving forward. Because a lot of what I'll say tonight will come back to that. I know I'm on limited time, so I want to give as much time for questions. The top 20 multinational companies turning over $10 billion a year should be paying around $650 million a year, collectively pay $1.8 million a year. That works out to be 0.018%. 0.018%. And when you talk about the fiscal restraints that we've got as a country, and the government keeps saying, but how can we afford to do this and how can you afford to do that? It's plain and simple. It's absolutely as simple as that, of making sure that everybody plays a responsible part in capitalism. I'm a capitalist.
Yeah.
I've been in business my entire life. I absolutely believe that if I work hard and I get ahead in my businesses, I can employ people, I put food on families' tables, I can actually create opportunities of growth and development for my country, the country I love, but I pay my taxes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody that works for somebody is paying taxes. You don't even get to see it. It's taken out. And why we allow these multinationals to operate the way they do is absolutely beyond anybody in New Zealand first. It's been going on for generations, and they are letting it get away. They're letting them get away with it. Now, there's legislation already in place in other parts of the world, the UK and Australia to name two, where they've tightened right up on this. We saw what happened with Apple, with their $4.5 billion of turnover and paid zero tax with a $4.5 billion turnover. We've heard about Compass. Now, this is absolutely insidious. That Compass is a multinational company based out of the UK with international profits of around $1.5 billion a year. Compass, interestingly, is the very company that got the contract to run all the DHBs and put the food in the South Island. Now they had $140 million of profit. How much tax did they pay? I was going to say none, but they might have paid a swidge, a little tiny amount. But I would actually feel more comfortable probably saying none. The reality is with base erosion and profit sharing like these companies take advantage of, we are letting money go out of our country, and guess who's left to pick up the tab? You, me, we're all here paying for it. Now when we start talking about New Zealand First policy, and let's just start with one of our policies which I thought was probably the bedrock of last election, was taking GST off food. Take GST off our residential rates. For goodness sakes, tax on rates is just absolutely an abomination. Rates is a tax. You're taxing a tax. How's that going to help your families? How's that going to help bring your rent prices down if you take the GST off that? But GST on food is this government's way of taxing people on fixed incomes. It's taxing the most vulnerable. It's taxing you to live, for goodness sakes. Having a 15% charge on every item that you buy in the supermarket so that you can live and get by is absolutely insidious. And it needs to stop. So when I talk about this, in public, particularly, we've got a very pleasant crowd here tonight. I might get a few rocks on it, bring them on. But in some quarters when I go and talk, and particularly to the blue crowd are great at throwing back the question, but how are you going to afford to do that, they say. How much is that going to cost to take GST? Sorry, just getting my glasses.
Yeah, that's right.
How are you going to afford to take GST off food? What's it going to cost? Well, we know what it's going to cost. It's going to cost about $3.5 billion to give everybody a better quality of life. To give you $100 worth of groceries for $85 a week. Think of the savings. Think of the better quality food you could get. Think of the families that are on fixed incomes, that are raising children that can't actually give quality food to their kids so they can go home, study, learn, sleep well, go to bed with a full tummy and wake up the next day. Food is the lifeblood. It's like putting tax on oxygen or tax on sunlight. Taxing our food is insidious when you think about it. And Australia don't tax food, and the UK they don't put VAT on food because it's wrong. And we are going to make sure that we get GST off food. $3.5 billion investment into the lives of all New Zealanders is what we're talking about. So the question is how? How do you afford to do that? Hence I started with my multinational tax issue. Well, it's estimated, and it's only an estimate because we really don't know how big this dragon is. It's estimated over $10 billion a year is uncollected from multinationals trading in our country. And we're left to pick up the tab. Imagine what we could do with $10 billion if it was only going to cost $3.5 billion to take 15% off our food. So, we've got Labour and National. Globalists wanting to know what the second group is? Nationalists. Now, I want to be really careful about what I'm talking about there because I don't want you to go away with this some sort of neo-Nazi rally that I'm talking about nationalism like they did in 1939 or 37 and 36. It's actually maternalism. That's a nicer way of saying we actually want to put our people first. We want to nurture our country, our economy, our people and put them ahead of everybody else. That's not xenophobia. That's not racism. That's sound economic, environmental, and social policy. That's the word I was thinking of, social. Social, economic, and environmental policy. Putting our country and our people first. New Zealand First, absolutely, for 24 years has put New Zealanders first. It's our name. Our principles have not changed. Our 15 fundamental principles are the same today as they were in 1993 when we set this party up, and Winston set this party up. Now, anybody that's out there telling you that New Zealand First is a flip-flop, oh, they're a populist party. I love it when people say that. Populist. What do you mean by populist? If you mean being a populist party refers to the fact that we are popular at the moment, yes, we are popular, and we are growing popularity by the minute. We are on a trajectory of popularity. But you know what? We haven't got there because we've changed our mind along the way. Flip-flop like Labour done, back some socks like National, been a lapdog like Actors having its belly rubbed, constantly. We have got there through determination, bloody-mindedness, and being right firm on our principles. So we are popular because people have seen the relevance of New Zealand First policy. It is sound economics to put your people first and put your environment first. That's exactly what we stand for. So I love having that conversation with people that come out and lambast New Zealand First, or Winston is running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. That's absolutely nonsense. That reminds me of a quote. I was at a speech with Winston up in Auckland several months ago now, and it was absolutely jam-packed. And I was off to the side, and we were sort of shoulder to shoulder. And Winston started the speech off like this. He said, I don't know if anybody here knows anything about rabbits and hounds. And I was like, oh my God, he's lost it. He said, this is the guy, this is mind snap, he's going to talk about rabbits and hounds. How the hell is this going to relate to politics? Anyway, he goes on to say, because anybody that knows about rabbits and hounds, if you put a hound in a paddock with one rabbit, that hound will get that rabbit. And everybody goes, no, this makes sense. And I'm starting to take my hands down and go, okay, it's making sense. He said, but if you put that same hound in a paddock with 100 rabbits, it'll be so confused, it'll be so lost, there'll be so many little wee fluffy bums bouncing around, it won't know which rabbit to go for, and it'll go unprotected, though these rabbits will get away. And I said, well, that makes sense too. It does, absolutely. That is our political system right now. We have got so many rabbits in the paddock, and we are the only dog that's trying to get hold of these rabbits and get rid of them. I'm sorry if I've got any bunny lovers here, maybe it's not a very good metaphor. But the reality is we have got so many things going wrong in our country at the moment. And people that are open-minded to it, like clearly the people that are here today to listen to New Zealand First philosophy and ideology, go, yeah, we've had this for too long rammed down our throats. This absolute rubbish that you're peddling out to us, it's got flaws in it, it's got holes in it. And then you've got these people that have got their blinkers on, they don't want to see anything different. And it's up to every single one of us here to just start questioning people. The only way we can get an idea changed is with a better idea. And guess what? We've got better ideas. If you think of what's been happening over just the last 3 years, we've seen flag referendums, we've seen the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I'm sure you're going to ask me some questions, so I might leave it to you. Give me some questions. We've seen stupid comments coming out of the government saying, we've got a surplus. You know, while they're calling out we've got a surplus, I say to people, now, you know how to get a surplus, don't you? And people, of course they know that, but they don't know where I'm going with it. They say, well, what do you mean? Well, we do budgets every month, your household budgets. You've got to know how much you've got for rent, you've got to know how much you've got put aside for your petrol, your phone, a bit of entertainment, sports for the kids, whatever your budget consists of, you've got a budget, yeah. And it runs pretty leanly and tightly, yeah. So if you want to get a surplus, you just start cutting back on stuff. Just stop buying food, for example. Don't go to the doctors even if you need to. Don't send your kids off to sports. Now all of a sudden that becomes a surplus and a little pot of money starts gathering. You think, woohoo, but how good are you really? Because the only reason we've got this fictitious paper surplus is because they have run down our assets. They have run down our infrastructure. They have run down our district health boards. They have run down our education facilities. They have frozen the police budgets. That's what they've done to get their bogus surplus, because of course it's an election year. And now they're turning around and they're throwing it all out to everybody saying, well, we've got $11 billion we're going to put into infrastructure. Hang on a minute. You haven't been putting money into our infrastructure for the last 9 years. Now you're promising to spend it over the next 4. We need $11 billion every single year, the rate that you've got immigration ramped up to. And it's getting people to see and understand that what you're hearing the media portray the government is doing a great job, and the government are throwing it out there like they are, and you start questioning, what direction are we actually going in? This neoliberalism trickle-down economy, which only benefits the elite, needs to be flipped on its head. And we need a bottom-up driven economy. We have people at the bottom without skills, without education, without the background and the knowledge of doing a job, that are prepared to work hard, get off their backside and get a job, can get ahead. Now, post the First World War and post the Second World War, perfect examples of a bottom-up economy. When we had literally diggers coming back from the war and they were throwing gravel off the back of a truck onto the road, or they were digging post holes, or they were working in factories. If you were willing to work and you were able to work, there would be a job there for you, and that job was enough to sustain your family. In general terms, a one-income family was enough to support the family, and you could have 1 or 2 holidays a year. You could afford good food. You might not be able to go and buy a flash Harry car or a colour TV, but you could get by, you could get ahead. The next step up was the people that had education, that had training, that had experience. Management, they got a little bit more than these people down the bottom that were getting well paid to do these jobs, and so on and so forth, right up to the chain of command, right up to the big bosses. But the money wasn't fast enough coming in for those big executives and the big city money people, so they flipped it on its head due to the government, the national government, that got us here. Now we're in dire straits. We need to get back to paying people a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. A sustainable wage that enables workers that are prepared to work hard the ability to support their family and get ahead. And actually aspire to be better, to either educate themselves or get better training so that they can actually create better wealth for themselves and more opportunity. And you might say, that's just ideology, it's never going to work, you're never going to get back to there. Well, I say rubbish, we can get back there. Prioritising people and putting people first is what New Zealand First does. And we will do it. But we need your help. This is an election year. We are only months away from probably, I would say, the most important election of 2 generations. And I know we've heard it all before. People say every election is important. But if we don't do something about the government's direction and their arrogance towards New Zealanders, they shouldn't be called the National Party. We should call them the International Party.
Yeah.
They've got more interest in looking after their overseas investors than looking after their own democratic voters. That's the reality. Look, I'm not here to beat up somebody else to make myself feel better, and they're not here to defend themselves. And I can't wait till the debates start with some of these National Party guys. I mean, we've got Simon Bridges in my electorate from Tauranga. In fact, he's quite special, that guy, because he doesn't show up. He actually thinks he's got it in the bag. He says, oh no, we've got this, mate. You just you go along to all those meetings and debates in the House. Well, I'm going to bring a sack of potatoes with me just to ask Simon Bridges what I'll put a little picture of his face on it. The arrogance of these people, that they think they're representing us and they're not even prepared to stand up. They're flying around like they're eagles, looking down at us thinking that we're their turkey serving them. Well, I can tell you right now, that's not the way New Zealand First thinks about our people. I see myself no different to my colleagues who see themselves and ourselves no different to everybody else out there. We're passionate about making change. That's why we don't waste our time pushing hard for electorate MPs. If anybody says, why don't you ever push hard for your electorates? I say, well, let me explain it to you like this. Democracy is actually flawed. Democracy, if you want to understand, just look at California. The governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, a muscle-bound freak. What does he know about running the largest state of America? That's called democracy. He had a name that people associated with and they branded him to it. So you can actually deflect democracy just by having a popular person. Look at Maggie Barry, for goodness sakes. What does she know apart from arranging dried flowers and leaving myrtle rust right here? The reality is, not very much. I could get 70 MPs, I could get 70 All Blacks and put them in every seat around the country, and I guarantee you 60 of them would get elected, 60% of them would get elected. That's democracy. Or the other way to get democracy is to throw enough money at something and promote them, like you see McDonald's. God, we get McDonald's for dinner, my security guard. Oh, we need to eat something. You can't go be hungry. You throw enough money at the Golden Arches and tell the kids that this is the best thing since sliced bread. You tell everybody that this food's good for you, and people are like, oh, there must be good. So telling everybody it's great. That's democracy. But we've got a party that's set up in a way that we put people into positions because they add value to a party. We've got people from the military. We've got people with legal backgrounds, economic backgrounds. We've got teachers, small business owners and operators. People that actually are real people that have come from not beltway politicians that have gone through a degree and followed a line of ancestry that's given them a right to be in politics. Not the bureaucratic line, the hard-working line. New Zealand First is filled with people like this. We've got farmers. A whole group of people that actually represent New Zealand First. And then a list is created of the skills that are required to get our policies into place. So it's all about people. It's not about profile. It's not about this big ego trip for MPs driving around in special limousines, thinking that they're somehow special. It's actually about us, the people. We, us all. This election is going to be the most important because we need change. The next topic I want to talk about is what we've seen go through the House at rapid pace. I am watching the clock. That's all right. Which is this RMA reform. And this is probably one of the single biggest issues that we've got in immigration, which is coming up as a topic. Because what we have seen happen now, and through a period of time for at least 20 years anyway, slowly but surely we have been walking and embarking on a trip of government-sanctioned apartheid. Where, because of your genealogy, because of your colour of your skin, your ethnicity, you get a privilege over somebody else. That's apartheid. That's racism. We're against that as a country. We absolutely deplore what went on in South Africa. Any country that puts another race over somebody else, even a gender, we deplore that. We believe in equality. That is our country. Everybody the same. This country gave women was the first country in the world to allow women to vote. Equal rights and opportunities. Fantastic. That's what we stand for. But now, somehow, through flagellation of trying to appease these minority groups by giving them privilege, we're actually undermining our entire society. We're actually giving privilege to others and taking away their opportunity, but we are also emasculating a race of people at the same time. So it's a double-edged negative. When you talk to the vast majority of married people out there, and New Zealand First has got probably one of the largest per capita support bases from married because they understand. Giving us some token gesture of you can't get yourself, so we're going to give you a help out because you're married is a disgrace. You have two young students going through school together, topping their class, equal all the way. One is white, one is married. One is non-married, one is married. I don't like the word Pākehā because I find that a bit offensive. But these two people, they go through, they're absolutely the best that any school could produce. They both go into medicine. They go through medicine, they top their class. They come out, they go into a general practice. Separately. Now all of a sudden, people, because they understand the tokenism that has been offered to marry, the 20% quota that you need to go through university, question the fact that this person who has every right, every qualification, every positive aspect that you could possibly ask for in a doctor is looked down upon by people because they think, well, did he deserve to get there? Did she actually do the work? Well, I feel more comfortable if I go to this doctor. So we've created another divide through this government-sanctioned apartheid and this self-flagellation that is continuing on. And it's got to stop. And I am proud, absolutely proud to be a New Zealand First, standing behind Winston when he talks like this. This is not racism. This is about fairness and equality. Standing up for everybody equally, giving everybody the right opportunity. It's not about handouts, how much money we can give to you. It's about help up. Now, a bit of a background story for me, because just to wrap this story up, and I'm sure questions are going to come from the floor. There's notes going down here, there's notes going down here. My sister passed away many years, in fact it was 2001, so that's 16 years ago, and her two children, my wife and I raised as our own, and they're married. My daughter's covered from tattoos from her fingertip to her earlobes. I'm not a fan of them, but she's got these beautiful married tattoos all over her, and that's her heritage, that's her background, that's great. I'm not into it, she is. Doesn't change the fact. My point being is this, I've got 3 children to my wife, my direct line of children, and I've got my 2 married children. What on earth, why would I ever consider giving any of my children a privilege over the other one because of the colour of their skin? I would hope that any state, any reasonable state that's in a position to help up, not hand out, anybody that falls behind or below a line of poverty or existence should be there to give that opportunity to get them up, but not have it based on gender, not have it based on race, which is what's happening right now. And we've got a claim that is taking up the entire country more than any resource management request. If you want to build, if you want to develop, or if you want to move forward, we've now got to consult with iwi, and it's called iwi participation. The whole idea of the reforms of the RMA was to speed it up, make things more efficient. We've turned bureaucracy into bureaucracy. And we're getting it on steroids at the moment. We've got some serious challenges ahead, but we have made it very clear. Winston stood up straight after that legislation and we fought it all the way to the end. When we get into government, we will repeal that piece of legislation, the first thing that we do. And that again gives me the solace and gives me the heartfelt passion to know we are in the right place. We are a passionate group of people that stand by our principles and stand by our people. 5 more minutes, I just want to do a bit of a discussion about immigration because I know it's probably a hot topic also right now. And I've many times started a speech or a contribution by saying, just so you know, you heard it here first, New Zealand First is pro-immigration. Gets a few eyes lifted and whatnot. The reality is, we are absolutely pro-immigration. Any sound economy must have immigration. We must have growth. Immigration is like capitalism, but with people. But when you're over-capitalising and you're not building the infrastructure, it erodes away your base. And that's what we're seeing. Hyper-immigration causing so many problems in every aspect that we can talk about. Talk about our health. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Nurses Association in Hamilton. And I thought, I don't know, it's not one of my portfolios. My portfolios, I'll talk about those in a minute. But I had to go away and study. My point being is I had to go and find out what this whole health space was about and get my head around it. But it came back to immigration. The waiting lists that are on there for people that have worked a generation or two here that can't go and get a hip replacement, can't go and get their knees done. They're a backlog. We've got migration taking nursing migrants coming here, taking away our Kiwi jobs. 2,800 nurses a year go through Nurses Training College and can't get jobs at the other end because we've got on the skills shortage list nurses. So they come out of training college with huge amounts of debt and no opportunity to get ahead, all driven out of immigration. Now we absolutely believe in immigration, as I've said, but it's not about the people that need us, it's about the people that we need. The people that are going to add value to our economy, the people that are going to create opportunities for others. But allowing the numbers of people, which is 73,000 net migrants a year, and don't let the government tell you, no, those are Kiwis coming back from Australia. That's absolute lies. It's absolutely yes. Somebody told me that today. I said, don't let the government tell you that. Don't buy into that. We've got 139,000 migrants a year, of which 73,000 net. Now that's a city the size of Rotorua arriving in New Zealand every single year. We've never seen numbers like it. It's unprecedented in the history of this country. Now, Rotorua's got 3 hospitals and 12 schools. We're not building 3 hospitals and 12 schools a year around this country. We're declining them. We're shutting schools down. We're cutting back on things. We haven't got enough staff to do it. We can't get, but we're not going out and giving them the work. We're getting migrants to come in and take those jobs. The amount of unskilled labour that comes into this country and the amount of people that are taking up our houses, we don't have enough people to house our own people. Don't have enough houses for them. We've got people living in cars. The new homeless is not the bums that we have seen, and they still are there, that have got mental health issues that are walking our streets looking for food in the rubbish bins and finding cigarettes to finish off. This new homelessness are people that are working. They're the working homeless. They're families living in cars. We've created this problem and they haven't got a solution for it. We have. Let's stop speculation buying for a start. Now we know of one Chinese national who flew in on a 737-800 jet, private jet, a billionaire Chinese guy. This is nothing against China, this is just a fact. Flew into New Zealand, was here for a weekend and bought 80 odd houses. Now we know, I don't know if all of them are still untenanted, but we know, I'd like to say all of them, but most likely all of them, most of those houses aren't tenanted. For them, when they're borrowing money at 1% in China versus our Kiwis borrowing money for 5% here, and when you've got $1 billion anyway, it's sort of self-perpetuating and growing at its own rate of knots, and with property prices going up at over 25% per annum in Auckland alone, your money, of course it's better in property in New Zealand. You'd be mad not to. And putting a tenant is just inconvenience because they'll wreck your property and make a mess of it. I can just land bank it like blood diamonds in Africa. And because when you create a demand, you create a price hike. And this is not just one case. There are hundreds and hundreds upon hundreds of cases like it. Hence New Zealand First is asking for a foreign buyers register, so we know how much land, how many buildings are actually owned and being held up on foreign speculated buyers. Right, that's my 45 minutes, but I'd love to come and take some more questions. I'm sure you've got plenty of them, so fire away. Thank you very much. I can't thank you enough for coming out tonight. I know it's a miserable night out there. It's been a huge pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Amanda, and I look forward to coming to Romitai and having a chat with you there. But look, we're easily available. We are here for exactly things like this tonight. I will leave those cards over there. Take one, email me. Definitely will be hearing back from me.
Thank you for coming.